also law in California that comprehensive sex ed must be taught in California. So we're going to talk about the details of that and what you can actually do about it. But after this is over, I hope that you'll stop back at the information table where we have voter guides, we have t-shirts, we have some Family Research Council action material that is yours for free to take home and to study and learn more about the issues. So we'll go ahead and get started, and we're just so blessed to be here and blessed to have Karen England. If you want to come up first, let's give her a hand, please. And she is going to give you some information that you need to take notes. So here you go, Karen.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to have to keep looking up because my PowerPoint is up there. So thank you for coming out and wanting to hear about sex education in the schools. I never thought I would be doing this. I certainly never thought I'd be standing in churches talking about sex education, but that apparently is my calling. So, comprehensive sex education. You hear a lot about it, and a lot of states are wrestling with it, but here in California, this is an issue we dealt with several years ago. And that's when there was a shift in the law, and we went from sex education was voluntary, and the schools could choose to have it or not. And you could, they were a lot looser on whether or not you had to have your children in the class. And it was a lot more like when we grew up. They covered the basic hygiene, the body parts changing, and just kind of the basics, like when, the films we watched when we were young. And it's drastically changed, and especially after 2015, and you can go to the next slide, it has now gone to kind of a rights-based, where, and I have some of the teacher training manuals where they talk about how the child has a right to their own sexuality and to explore it and to become a holistic approach to sexuality. And that they need to embrace that, and the schools believe that it's their job to teach them that, and that I'm going to come down here and kind of be with you guys. And so it's a whole different ballgame than when we were going to school. It is all about teaching them how to have sex. They would say how to have sex safely. I don't think it's really that safe, most of what they're teaching them. So you can go next slide. So it's rights-based. It's called the California Healthy Youth Act. Often it's called AB 329, or it's called CHIA. And it was passed way back in 2015. But it was sponsored by, officially, the people that wrote the bill, that approved every amendment that the legislators talked about and took. It was the ACLU, Planned Parenthood, and Equality California. They wrote this piece of legislation. They were very crafty in how they wrote it, knowing what they wanted in the classroom. And so, next slide, they went ahead and they passed it, and we went from something that was always voluntary to sex education being mandatory in California, and they must teach it once in junior high or middle school, and must teach it at least once in high school. Now, in California, they're doing that, for instance, Fremont, San Diego, they're teaching it much younger. And they're teaching it for more than one grade. Like they might start in 3rd grade and go all the way through 12th grade. So you're not just getting it once in high school and once in junior high. You're getting it every year from 3rd grade, 4th grade on. So that's what's happening. I'm going to talk about the mandates in the law. The law says the school district has to teach. If you choose to teach sex ed, your district, at an earlier age, let's say 5th grade, you must teach the same mandates. So you can't just say, well, we're just going to do a little bit of it, but not the whole thing. If you choose to do sex education in 5th grade or 7th grade or 6th grade, 4th grade, you have to cover all of the subjects that it mandates you do. So I'm going to go into those. Next slide. So we've got high school, middle school. So it promotes sexual curiosity, talks a lot about pleasure points, what's pleasurable, in both mixed company. They don't separate the guys and the girls anymore. Lots of lessons on gender fluidity. As a matter of fact, the law says you have to teach gender, and you have to talk about the negative gender stereotypes, like the traditional view that a biological male is a male. That would be considered a negative stereotype. It promotes abortion. makes sure that your children can find out where they can not just legally have an abortion, but get all of these services without parents knowing, even down to the local level. The state mandates that they have to tell your kids about local resources where they can go, get tested, get on birth control, get the morning after pill, etc. And all of the curriculums do have that in it. It promotes very progressive organizations. As an example, every one of the curriculums that I've gone through that is considered California compliant, the very first resources they happen to give out to the kids and in the teachers' manuals is Advocates for Youth. You can look them up, but Advocates for Youth is nothing but an organization that's very progressive, they're trying to turn our kids into, student activists, and they believe that that's what the public school system is for. And Advocates for Youth, Planned Parenthood, all of those are the organizations that they are using as the additional resources. It obstructs parental rights. One of the changes in the law was, prior to this, the law always encouraged you to go to your parent. Go to your parent with a question. The teachers were encouraged, they didn't always do it, but to say, oh, that's kind of controversial, why don't you go home and ask your mom about that? Well, the law changed and now included trusted adult. So often it's ask a parent or a trusted adult. Well, when you're in junior high wanting to do something your parents don't want you to do, I'm going to go ask the trusted adult that's going to affirm me misbehaving. And so it obstructs parental rights. And when you read through all of the curriculum, and we brought it here tonight, you will find that it really does encourage them to, you need to really be separate and explore your sexuality. You need to, go with what you feel. You may be ready. Here are the things that make you ready to have sex. I mean, that's what they're actually teaching in our classrooms. So next slide. Here are the three main curriculums that the state has deemed compliant. A lot of people are out there saying there's approved curriculum. It's not necessarily approved because it doesn't go through the same process. That's a little bit of a technicality. But these three are the curriculum that they consider compliant, meaning they're not breaking the law if they're using this curriculum. And then there are a few other ones, and we've got copies of those too. San Francisco wrote some, Oakland wrote some of their own curriculum. And so those are the ones, they're all really bad. Advocates for Youth is the absolute worst, but they're all bad. And I've gone through them all. I wouldn't recommend any of them for any children. Next one. It's specifically, the law went in and said that abstinence only is not permitted. So the only, and throughout the law, they bring this point home, and they do in the curriculum as well. If you're going to talk about abstinence, it has to be in the context that it's one option, and here are the other options of birth control. So it's always just kind of a thrown in because they have to do it, but they are very clear throughout the curriculum that both the students receive and the teachers receive that you are not allowed to be abstinence only, and put an emphasis on abstinence that in their mind doesn't belong there. So next slide. It says sexual health education must respect and address the needs of students of all genders and sexual orientations. That means when they talk about it, and they talk about how you express your sexuality, and the curriculums cover this, they talk about anal sex, oral sex, vaginal sex. It's in all of the curriculums, even in middle school. It does talk about the idea that several lessons in all of the curriculums talk about gender being fluid, that gender is just a social construct. You're assigned at birth a gender, but that's not really who you are. And so you may be born in the wrong body, and we need to explore that and talk about that in the classroom. And there are lessons on it, the genderbread person. Every one of the curriculums covers the genderbread person. And so next slide. It also talks about, and I just was talking about this, gender identity, explore the harm of negative gender stereotypes. That is directly from the law. So in order to follow the law, which we recommend school districts do, they have to talk about the negative Stereotypes. Well, what are the negative stereotypes? I actually believe a biological male is a biological male, and I don't want to be showering or my granddaughter's showering with a biological male. I'd like that student to be accommodated, but not by exposing them to my daughter. Next slide. Oh, next slide, actually, I think I updated it. I sent this to you guys, and we'll go next slide. You have to cover all FDA-approved birth control. That means everything. That means the morning after pill, condoms. I learned a lot as I've been studying this. Internal, external condoms. Several of the curriculums do condom demonstrations and putting them on in the classroom. You must talk about, it says all FDA approved, but it doesn't mean you can't talk about other things that are not FDA approved. For instance, there is no FDA approved condom for anal sex. And I'm sorry to say that, but the curriculums are promoting that as an option of birth control to not get pregnant. And so it's important that you know, and I say this because they're telling our junior high children this. And you also have to instruct them on objective, it's not very objective, discussion on legally available pregnancy outcomes, meaning abortion. You need to let them know they have the right, and in California, a minor does have confidentiality and can go get an abortion without the parent being notified or consenting to it. And so it is going on. And when you go through the curriculum, you'll see that repeatedly it's encouraging them and telling them they have this right. You have this right. I mean, those of you that have had kids, they go through that stage where they know more than their parents, you don't know anything anymore, and the school's backing them up saying, yeah, you've got this right. Well, you know what? Their bodies are changing. They're going through all sorts of stuff. The last thing you want to tell them is, hey, go explore with all of that crazy nonsense that you're feeling. I thought I knew, I still think I know everything. Tell my husband all the time. But the last thing you want to be doing is telling a minor child who's growing up, going through this, that, hey, embrace that, just go explore it all. It's very harmful to our kids. Next slide. They have to talk about birth control condoms, morning after pill, the HPV vaccination. Again, they repeatedly tell you how you can go get this done without your parents knowing. They go so far as to tell you where locally you can go get the morning after pill, Walgreens, Target, CVS. So the curriculum is tailored so that San Diego has some of the local community resources listed. In Fremont, where they're fighting this, they have the local women's, supposedly health clinic, but abortion clinic listed as a local resource. So they're not just saying Planned Parenthood in the big concept of Planned Parenthood, they're giving you local resources down the street and the address and how to get there. They actually do role-playing on going into a clinic and asking for training on STIs, sexually transmitted infections. They have the students role-play. What would you say if you want to go in, if you think you're pregnant? And then they cover, hey, we're going to, and they're doing this in groups with guys and girls that, hey, let's talk about, how would you go in and say this? And what if they object? And do you have privacy? And oh, you don't have to worry, the doctor can't tell anybody. So it's very aggressive. Next slide. Next slide. Sorry, I updated my slides. I sent this and then changed my presentation. Okay, what about opt-out? And then let's go to the next slide, because this is where there's a lot of questions. So, how many of you have heard that you can opt your kids out of sex ed? I don't know what the big deal is. How many of you have heard that you can't opt your kids out? Okay, that right there shows what the problem is. There's a real inconsistency depending on who you ask, what you get to opt out of or not. The law, and Matt Sharp with ADF is going to cover that. The law says that you can opt out of sexually transmitted diseases and HIV prevention, that the parents need to be notified and given the opportunity to opt out of those. Many school districts, most school districts, are interpreting that to mean only those very, very limited parts of the curriculum. So if it's talking about relationships, same-sex couples, gender identity, that portion